Hi guys, Happy New Year and welcome to a new episode of Dial It Up. So for today's episode, I'm going to go over one of the most reviled powers in this entire game, and that is Pulse Wave. This has always been a tricky power, even with cleaning up the wording on it, the changes that have been made over the many years that this game has been out. Pulse Wave has always been one of those powers that causes a lot of confusion. It used to be very straightforward back in the day when we didn't have power interactions, we didn't have traits, we didn't have special powers. It was just ignore what's on the dial and do damage. Now that we have all of these special things and special wordings, when you get down to the nitty-gritty interactions of things, a lot of confusion has come about specifically just because of this one power. Every time, if you guys watch the rules forum like I do, every time a new character comes out, a new special power or trait comes out, you'll see like 5 threads just how does this power interact with Pulse Wave. So to get down to it, we'll just go over what Pulse Wave is reading directly from the pack. Pulse Wave. Give this character a ranged combat action even if it is adjacent to an opposing character. The area of effect for this attack is half the character's range value. Draw lines of fire to all other characters within the area of effect, including at least one opposing character. These lines of fire ignore all game effects except for walls, blocking, and elevated terrain. Game effects possessed or used by characters with a line of fire drawn to them are ignored until the action has been resolved. If a line of fire is drawn to more than one character, this character's damage value becomes 1 and is locked. Each character hit is dealt damage. So it's the most wordy of the powers that are in the pack itself. There's a lot of information going on there, so I'm just going to break it down bit by bit and talk about the interactions that happen just in of a Pulse Wave action of itself, starting right from declaring the action to the end and what you look for with power interactions in between. You give the character a ranged combat action. This is not a power action, it is a ranged combat action, which means it can be combined with any power that gives you a free ranged combat action, like running shot. So right off the bat, you can running shot and then Pulse Wave. And the next thing in that section is that you can make a Pulse Wave attack as a ranged combat attack even if you are adjacent to an opposing character. So you don't have to have Sharpshooter to be able to attack someone next to you with Pulse Wave. The next part of it is that you're going to make an area of effect. Now, area of effect is a new thing that was introduced in 2013 where it is a new game effect, and what it did was that they tried to streamline the wording on certain things such as Pulse Wave, Energy Explosion, and subsequently any special powers that use area of effect. What they happen to do also is make kind of an extra bracket within the calculation of range value. So what you have to do when you're determining your area of effect for this Pulse Wave action is you do your regular calculations for your range value. So that's going to be your printed range value, plus or minus any modifications, any replacements that's going to cause you to change your range value. Once you get your range value calculated, then on top of that, you're going to do the area of effect. So if you have your base, say your range is 10, and it's being halved for some reason. And then on top of that, you've got a couple of perplexes. So we'll say 10 goes to 5 plus 2. So that's a 7. That's your range value. And then the area of effect on top of that calculation is going to be a half on that, which will get you down to a 4 from that 7, because in Heroclix you always round up. So you do all of your calculations first that you normally do, your regular, replace, then modify that I've talked about on the show before, and then you half it. So there was confusion on this when the sniper rifle first came out, which the sniper rifle replaces your range with a range of 10. And people were worried that it was going to make a huge Pulse Wave area of effect. But that replacement on the sniper rifle was going to happen first. even before the area of effect comes into effect. Even before it was errated, that replacement was always going to happen before the area of effect took place. So once you figure out your area of effect, drawing lines of fire to characters that have to have at least one opposing character. That is one thing with Pulse Wave. You can attack friendly characters, can be targeted by this. As long as one opposing character is being targeted, then you can go forward with the action. So once the area of effect has been determined, then you actually draw the lines of fire. Now the lines of fire ignore all game effects except walls, indoor blocking, and elevated terrain. Now, if you do have someone on the rim of elevated terrain, you do follow all of the rules regularly used for attacking on the rim. So basically, there's this triangle of effect on the 45-degree angle. You draw the diagonals off, and anything inside that triangle can target you on the rim. So if the Pulse Waver is within that triangle, they can target you with Pulse Wave because you're still being able to draw the lines of fire, but if they were outside of that, they wouldn't ignore the elevated lines of fire that would normally be blocked during a ranged combat action. And then the next part is the part that, actually before I get into that, these lines of fire are being drawn right at this point. So before anything is being ignored other than the terrain, like hindering terrain is going to ignore stealth. Before anything is being ignored, you're drawing these line of fire. So there is a series of powers that have come out recently that many people got confused and thought that the rules of Pulse Wave had suddenly changed when it was just not so much, it wasn't that the rules got changed, is that it got clarified, is that everybody was allowed to know how this power actually works and continues to work. And that is that certain characters like the AVX Namor, Simon Baz, and the Indigo Battery say that lines of fire can't be drawn. Now this is a very distinct and very important distinction, is that there's a difference between lines of fire being blocked and lines of fire not being able to be drawn in the first place. So any character that has stealth, any special powers that stop blocking terrain, the Midnight Suns ATA I think is one of them, anything that would say, sorry, the hand ATA is one that is say that the lines of fire is blocked, Pulse Wave is going to get through that because of drawing the lines of fire. But anything that says the line of fire can't be drawn, that stops you. Right as soon as you figure out you've got your power, your range combat action, you've got your range value, go to your area of effect. Right at the area of effect, when you start drawing lines of fire, if that character's special power says you can't draw those lines of fire, then you're done. That character's not going to be targeted now. So once we move past that, as long as you are allowed to draw lines of fire to these characters, then the next step is that these lines of fire, once they are drawn, are going to ignore everything. They ignore game effects, they ignore powers, they ignore pretty much everything that that character has is being boiled down to just the numbers on their dial. There was even a clarification now with game effects being ignored that anything assigned to that character is now going to be ignored as well. So you have power batteries, you have entities, you have resources, anything that is coming directly from that character, assigned to that character, is going to be ignored. Except, of course, if the character's power says it can't be ignored. So if your power on the end, this character can use such and such a power, this does this and this and this, at the bottom it says this power can't be ignored, Pulse Wave's not going to get around that. So there are some exceptions to being safe from Pulse Wave. There are a lot of stop clicks that do say they can't be ignored, so you're going to hit that and stop. But anything else, shape change, super senses, probability control, anything that is in that area of effect of those lines of fire being drawn is just gone until the action itself resolves. So you don't get your powers back until that pulse wave action has resolved. So any special power that says once you're hit, once you're dealt damage, anything like that, that's going to get ignored. So even afterwards, you're not going to get that back until that pulse wave action has completely resolved. So if there is something that says after action's resolved, it all depends on what the activator was. Because if it says, if this character was dealt damage, after action's resolved, do this, well, the power was being ignored during that action, so it's not being activated to be able to come into play after action's resolved. I just realized how confusing I made that sound. Okay. And then probably the most easiest part of Pulse Wave is that if you are hitting more than one character, if you're targeting more than one character, I should say, even if you miss certain ones, if you're targeting more than one, it's locked at 1 damage. Now, I've talked about it before. A locked value is, it can't be replaced, it can't be modified, it is that value, and there's nothing you can do to change it. However, if you only single target someone, you're going to do your full damage straight through that dial, ignoring everything on it. So lining up a single target pulse wave can be very advantageous, as you can get around any kind of finicky powers that character has and deal them a whole whack of damage right through their dial. So now that we've gone through the step-by-step of how pulse wave works, the other thing I should mention that when you are doing a pulse wave, it is a simultaneous attack to everybody that is being targeted. So you only do 1 attack roll. You do your attack value, that calculation, whatever you've done there, replace, modify, so on. And that is now added to your attack roll up against the defense values of everybody that you have targeted to see who is going to get hit by that pulse wave. The other thing I should note on this is that anything outside of that area of effect, that bubble that we drew all those lines of fire to, can affect inside the bubble. So if you happen to have someone outside that range, the range that we had set up was 4. So if you have anybody outside that range of 4 that has, say, probability control and line of fire to your pulse waver, as long as they've got range and line of fire, they are outside that bubble. They're outside the area of effect. Their powers are not being ignored, so then they can use that probability control to try and re-roll that attack roll on the pulse waver. The other thing that would be ignored there, or sorry, not ignored, that can be affected would be powers that are or similar to perplex. So if a character within that pulse wave, in that bubble, has been perplexed, their defense has been perplexed up 1, say, and your perplexer is outside that 4 range, that bubble that we determined, that perplex isn't being ignored. It's not a game effect coming from that particular character, it's coming from the perplexer outside the bubble, so you still have to calculate that +1 into the defense value when you are doing your attack. There are special powers as well that will help you affect people within the range. Basically anything that says, as long as it says you're doing an effect to another character, so as long as it doesn't use terminology like this character is going to use super senses. There's a sensor girl from the Superman set who says adjacent Legion of Superhero characters can use super senses. If she's outside the pulse wave, but her friendly Legion of Superhero friends is inside the pulse wave, you're not going to do it because she's handing that person that character. That's going to be a game effect that they are using. So that's something that's not going to be in effect. But if it's a game effect that is coming, like a perplex, outside the pulse wave, that's going to affect someone on the inside, like the Days of Future Past Magneto, who, when he dies, can give someone +1 to their attack, +1 to their defense. He is a game effect coming from outside the bubble on the chosen character, so that chosen character is still going to get their modifications, but yeah, it's not going to get ignored because it's coming directly from Magneto as a game effect. He's outside the Pulse Wave. So that is Pulse Wave. Like I said, it's been one of the most convoluted, complicated powers to be on the standard list. It's right in the pack. It's a regular colored power, but it is the most confusing one. If you go onto the forums, the official WizKids forum, and type in a search for Pulse Wave, you'll get like 6 pages worth of topics just talking about Pulse Wave all on its own. There is nothing else in the game that is as prevalent when it comes to rules questions as Pulse Wave is. So if you've ever found it confusing in the past, don't worry. We all do. Almost every player has had a complication when it comes to Pulse Wave sometime in their career. So if there's anything that you guys feel that I didn't address, if you have questions, suggestions for another episode, just comment down below, and we'll see you next week for another episode of Dial It Up.